Hello, and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kate Harper of the 61st District in Montgomery County. Well, there's a new state law that requires voters to present a valid photo ID at the polls in order to cast a ballot. There are several acceptable forms of ID, but if you don't currently have one, you can get one in time for the general election, which is November 6th this year. Joining me now is the Secretary of the Commonwealth, Carol Achel. Secretary Achel leads the Department of State, which has been working diligently to make sure everybody who wants to vote will be able to do so this fall. She's here today to help get the word out to Montgomery County residents about how to get an acceptable ID. Welcome to the program, Carol.
I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I usually start by letting my guests tell a little bit about themselves so that my viewers know who you are. Now, I know you were a Chester County Commissioner because you're interested in open space and things like that, and that's how we first met. But can you tell my viewers a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, certainly, I'd be happy to. I was a housewife from Paoli and was motivated to get into public life because of a school board issue. I think like a lot of other people in our day, and I served on the Tredyffrin Easttown Board of School Directors for 6 years and was president for 2 years. And when I look back on my career, I think I'm most proud of the work we did as a school board to provide high quality education at a reasonable price. I then went on to be a county controller in Chester County and was able to bring 3 AAA bond ratings to Chester County, and went on to be then county commissioner when Tom Corbett was elected governor in 2010 and took office in 2011. He asked me if I would serve as Secretary of the Commonwealth, and I have enormous respect for Tom Corbett and working with him to do the same kind of work here in the state level, responsible government at a reasonable price.
Okay. Well, what does the Secretary of the Commonwealth do?
It's an interesting job, one of the most interesting things I've ever done. Almost half of our department is devoted to licensing professionals here in Pennsylvania. We've got
accountants, lawyers, people like that?
Landscape architects, doctors, crane operators, massage therapists. It's a very widespread group of professionals. They're all licensed through the Department of State, 900,000 of them. And I like to focus a lot of my energy on licensed professionals and building jobs here in Pennsylvania. So that's an important part of what we do. We also license all of the corporations. We've got 2.8 million corporations here in Pennsylvania, really an extraordinary large number of corporations and charities. Also, a little known fact is the Secretary of the Commonwealth also supervises mixed martial arts, professional boxing, and professional wrestling. So
wow. Your job basically touches every Pennsylvanian one way or another. We all use licensed professionals. We don't all go to boxing matches, but I mean, we all have corporations in our lives.
Absolutely, it's a very widespread group of interests that are all gathered together in the Department of State. The most significant part of our job right now is administering the Board of Elections for the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, that was my question. So how do you get to be the point person on voter ID?
The legislature passed a new regulation and a new law in March, and we're going to make sure that all Pennsylvanians are aware of the law and able to secure photo ID for the November election. We think most Pennsylvanians already have acceptable photo ID.
Well, why do you think that?
Well, we did a study, and we were fortunate. We just did the census in 2010, the United States Census, and the census did a study that says that people who are 18 years of age or older in Pennsylvania, residents of Pennsylvania, and citizens, that we have 9.6 million people in Pennsylvania who could vote if they wanted to.
Okay.
That's the total number of people who could vote if they wanted to. PennDOT already has in its database 9.5 million. So we're thinking that we're looking for about 100,000 people at the most who might need photo ID.
Other than a driver's license, because the people that PennDOT has either have a current driver's license or had one.
Right, and if a person had a Pennsylvania driver's license after 1990, they're still in the PennDOT database. So if you've had a driver's license in the last 22 years. All you have to do is go into a PennDOT licensing center, give them your name, and they'll look you up on their database and take a new picture, and you're good to go.
All right, so most Pennsylvanians have a driver's license or had one.
Most.
And they should have no trouble showing up at the polls and showing their Pennsylvania driver's license, which is an acceptable photo ID.
Correct.
All right, so that takes care of most people. But you know, the media is focused on the people at either end, the young people who are starting to vote. Of course, they've been required to have photo ID for some time at their first voting, and older people who no longer drive. So let's talk a little bit about those two groups. Let's hit the college kids first.
Okay, the college students may use their college ID cards as long as they have an expiration date. When the law was passed, we were made aware that some colleges and universities in Pennsylvania didn't put expiration dates on their student ID cards, but they've been real cooperative. The entire Penn State system is now putting IDs or expiration dates on their ID cards. Temple University, Drexel, University of Pennsylvania did, so it was no change for the University of Pennsylvania. Carnegie Mellon, Pitt, all are putting IDs. State system of higher education is.
So all of those college students, which must be tens of thousands, can use their college ID that has a photo on it and an expiration date.
That's correct. If students are Pennsylvania residents and have driver's licenses, they can use either their college ID or their Pennsylvania driver's license. The use of college IDs would be fundamentally for students from other states who maybe go to state college too.
And are domiciled here, because if they're voting back home absentee, they can't vote two places.
They may not vote two places. That is unlawful.
Right, and that's one of the points of having voter ID. Now, I know you're a suburbanite, and so am I. I mean, all the kids in my neighborhood got their driver's licenses the instant they turned 16, I think, including my own boys. How about you?
My children all had driver's licenses the instant they turned 16. Primarily, we're looking at students who maybe live in the city and for one reason or other decide not to get a driver's license. They certainly can also go to a PennDOT facility and get a non-driver photo ID for voting purposes.
So at the young end of the spectrum, we have three possibilities. You either have a Pennsylvania driver's license, you get your college ID with an expiration date and your photo, or you can go get the non-driving ID.
Correct. You may also be an employee of a municipality, and you can use a municipal ID card. You can use U.S. passports. People who are active duty military, you can use your military ID card.
Okay. Well, let's look at the other end of the spectrum, because I've heard in my district, we've done a lot of outreach on this and tried to reach all the seniors who no longer drive. So let's talk about, if I'm a senior, I no longer drive, how do I get a photo ID if my driver's license expired? I mean, I had one, but I don't, maybe I moved to a retirement community where I don't need to drive.
You may have many options. If you live in a retirement community, the law specifically provides for that retirement community to issue you a photo ID, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a little laminated card. It can be anything that the care facility wants to produce that shows your name, your picture, and an expiration date.
And that's true even if you live, let's say you live at Folkways or Brittany Point, you live independently. You're not in the nursing facility or even assisted living. You can still use that ID card.
You can. And people have asked, well, how can that be as secure as an ID card that's issued through PennDOT? When you entered the care facility, so much information was given to the care facility about you and your past.
Trust me, they know who you are.
They know who you are, and they will, and their issuing an ID card will be really as secure as a PennDOT ID card.
Well, I think most of these continuing care retirement communities, of which I have several in the district, they're sort of a micro community. If you think of your township as local government, your retirement community can be a micro community within that, and so it makes sense that they can also issue ID.
Well, oftentimes they serve as polling places.
Absolutely.
I was at
all of mine are polling places.
Presbyterian Village in Rosemont, and they vote right there in the care facility, and they know everyone. They are the poll workers and the majority and minority inspectors, and they know they know the community. So it'll be they're looking forward to it, actually.
All right. Now, so we've handled the people at one end of the spectrum who are the young students. Now, it's been the law for quite some time in Pennsylvania that you have to show voter ID the first time you vote anyway, right?
That is true.
So we've talked about the college students or the 18 to 22 range, and we've talked about the folks who have been voting for years but no longer drive.
Correct.
All right. Now let's talk about people in the middle who, for some reason or another, don't drive, aren't in college, and aren't in a licensed care facility. What are the other options? And I understand that the Department of State, your department, has rolled out a new ID card that's even easier to get than the PennDOT ID.
We were able to do that with the cooperation of PennDOT. PennDOT facilities, because of the changes that happened from 9/11,
sure,
needed to change the way they issued.
They need to be sure of who they are.
Yes, because you can use a driver's license to board an airplane. And fundamentally, that's where the holdup is. And so these people have to be, those cards have to be secure. And PennDOT facilities do facial recognition. When you have your photograph taken at a PennDOT facility, it goes into the worldwide database.
Wow.
So just keep that in mind when you're getting your photo taken.
I always smile just in case it's ever in the hands of a law enforcement officer.
The PennDOT driver's license is a far more secure document than it was maybe 20 years ago. So that card required a birth certificate with a raised seal, your social security card. That it's a paper card that, I don't know about you, but I got a card years ago and it's looking pretty tattered now.
I still have mine.
Is yours tattered?
Yeah.
All right, so you need the birth certificate and the card. More than the number, you have to actually have the card, and then you have to prove that you're a resident. So
because PennDOT's goal here is not letting someone vote. PennDOT's goal is making sure hijackers don't get on airplanes.
That's correct. They have different goals. So the Department of State said, you know, we just want to make sure that you are who you say you are. And if you go into a PennDOT driver's licensing center and you don't have a birth certificate with a raised seal, but you were born in Pennsylvania, the Department of Health can verify your birth certificate electronically and permit PennDOT to issue a license or a photo ID. That's the PennDOT issued one. But we're still having problems with the people who didn't have birth certificates.
All right, so hold that thought for a second.
I'm holding it.
We have to take a break here, and we'll be right back. My guest today is Carol Achel. She's the Secretary of the Commonwealth, and we're talking about voter ID and how you can get an acceptable ID if you don't have a Pennsylvania driver's license, which is, of course, an acceptable ID. So stay with us, and we'll be right back.
Did you know that in the corridors in the first floor of the capital of Pennsylvania, there are nearly 400 individual mosaics? The idea for creating these intricate tiles was first suggested by Henry C. Mercer in 1902. A year later, he received the commission to prove 16,000 square feet of pavement tiles for the Great Rotunda and corridors of the new state capitol building in Harrisburg. Mercer set about designing subjects for approximately 400 mosaics. He chose as his general theme the history of Pennsylvania, and he soon realized that his tiles could tell stories. Although the arrangement seems random, the mosaics are very thoughtfully placed in the floor. The tile sequence is roughly chronological, beginning at one end with the scenes depicting the Native Americans. The mosaics progress into the story of European habitation in the New World and encompass the Commonwealth's triumph through process and intervention. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. I'm State Representative Kate Harper, and my guest today is Carol Achel, Secretary of the Commonwealth. We've been discussing Pennsylvania's new voter ID law and what the Department of State is doing to educate the public about the process and what you need to vote if you don't have a Pennsylvania driver's license, which is, of course, an acceptable ID. Now, Carol, we had just gotten into the subject of Department of State identification cards, which are easier to get than PennDOT cards. But you can get them at a PennDOT licensing place, right?
Yes, you may.
What are these?
Department of State ID card is for voting purposes only, and it's fundamentally for people who don't have raised seal birth certificates. I talked to a man in Sunbury, and he was born in Aruba, U.S. citizen, but his birth certificate is written in Dutch. Can you imagine going into a PennDOT facility with a Dutch birth certificate?
Well, I have a lot of respect for PennDOT, but I'm not sure they can handle that.
Well, and that's an unusual circumstance. There are also people who were born in times when they didn't issue birth certificates, or they can't find a birth certificate.
Or they were born at home. I read about somebody like that.
These are people who are not born in Pennsylvania, and there's no Pennsylvania birth certificate. All those people need to do is go into a PennDOT facility, tell the clerk that they're in for a Department of State voter ID card. They need to provide their last name, first name, date of birth, and their social security number and some proof of residence, and that's it. It's
and they can get this Department of State ID card.
Right. They do not need the tattered social security card. They just need to give or the raised seal birth certificate.
Okay. All right. Now let's talk about. Let's say Rip Van Winkle needs to vote, and Rip goes to the polling place on November 6th and hears for the first time about this law. Are they going to turn him away? I don't want people to stay home because they're afraid that they'll be turned away.
They will not be turned away. No one in Pennsylvania will be denied the right to vote. Ask for a provisional ballot, and if you are who you say you are, your provisional ballot will count.
Okay, and every polling place will have these things?
Yes, every polling place will have them. Do not leave the polling place without voting.
All right, now, I have another question for you, and this comes to me from judges of election who are a little worried about how to administer the new law, even though we did this during the primary and virtually no problems at all. But let's just say somebody comes into the polling place and my name on my voter registration card, which I still have and which is in the book, is Catherine M. Harper. But of course, most people know me as Kate Harper, and that's what my state-issued ID calls me, Kate Harper. Can I vote?
Yes, you can. The law says the name must substantially conform, and clearly Kate and Catherine are fundamentally the same name. If your name is Margaret and you're using the nickname Peg, that works. If you have a first initial, you have a horrible first name that your mother gave you, and you've never used it. For instance, there's
people have R, whatever their name is.
Correct. It's my brother's name has a pretty bad first name. That's a family name. He's always used the initial S, and his middle name is William, so he's S. William. Only on his driver's license do they have this first name that he doesn't want anyone to know about.
He didn't register to vote using that name either.
He did not. But so if he goes in and he's known as Bill, so it's S. William Tanner, and that's fine.
And that will work as well. Okay, let me give you another one. I actually registered to vote, as many of us do, before we got married. Okay, so my name is Catherine M. Harper. But my driver's license, which has been renewed several times since I got married, let's not talk about how long that's been, is Catherine M. Harper Kelly.
That's fine too.
I can still vote.
Absolutely. Substantially conform. You've got Catherine Harper, Kate Harper, and the most important part is the picture.
Sure.
Do you look like who you say you are? And
I do, unfortunately. But
well, your ID card has a number of hints. We're trying to establish that you are who you say you are. You've got a name that substantially conforms. Your picture looks like you. Your address is the same address as you have in the polling book. You know, there's a real good chance that you are who you say you are.
Right.
That's what they're looking for.
And that is because the purpose of voter ID law is not to deny somebody the right to vote. It's just to make sure that the person who presents himself is the person in the book.
That's right.
Okay. So in addition to
Kate,
those things,
if I came in and said, "Hi, I'm Kate Harper," and I showed my ID card, they go, you're not.
Right.
Yeah, we don't look alike.
Right, you're right. That's right, and they know me where I vote, so that's the way it works. All right, so now we've talked about the people at one end, at the other end. Is there anybody else who's entitled to vote in Pennsylvania who you think will have trouble getting an appropriate ID?
I think we'll be able to reach every single registered voter. Our number in the Department of State is 8.2 million. We have 8.2 million registered voters in Pennsylvania, and I've told my staff I want to find every one of them and make sure they have photo ID. We already know absolutely that 95% of those people have PennDOT IDs, probably more than that by the time we get done. Driver's license or non-driver photo IDs. So we're looking for the last few that may not have photo IDs, and we don't think there'll be that many. So far we've got 7,000, and it would be wonderful if we could make sure that everyone has a photo ID.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, in my office, and the information will appear on the screen at the end of the program, my office, we have a staffer named Mike who's become an expert in this, and he has not had any trouble getting voter ID for people who need it. He's working with your Department of State, and he's working with PennDOT, and it seems as though most people are in PennDOT's database already.
I was kind of surprised, but as I said at the very beginning, 9.5 million people who are 18 years of age or older, citizens and residents of Pennsylvania, are already in the PennDOT database. That's a huge database.
All right, now suppose I gave up my driver's license 5 years ago. Would I still be able to vote?
Yes, there is no problem. You can go in and give your name. They already have your information in the PennDOT database. When you got your driver's license, you had to show the kind of identification like birth certificate, social security number, and they'll just sit in front of the camera, get your picture, and walk out with your card.
All right, so that's not going to be a problem. All right, now I had mentioned the fact that we did do a rollout of this in the primary. I don't recall any problems. I did not hear of any problems in my district at all. And on election day, like a lot of people who have to run for office, every election day I visit all of my polls. I go to each one, say hello to people at each one, and I didn't hear any problems. Are you expecting any problems on November the 6th?
We are not expecting problems, but we'll be prepared for problems. Similarly, on election day, I went to polling places in the city of Philadelphia. I visited 19 polling places, spoke to each one of the judges of elections, and to the person, there was not a single problem.
And that was in Philadelphia?
In Philadelphia.
I know there's a lot of angst and anxiety about this whole thing.
There is. We want to make people feel comfortable with the law and be assured that no one will be denied the right to vote in Pennsylvania.
Now, some people say that we shouldn't have tried this during a presidential year. Do you have an opinion on that, Carol?
We'll get more voters in, because these are the highest turnout. This will be a great opportunity to make sure that all of our registered voters have photo ID. And presidential elections are important elections. I remember the year 2000, and yes. I don't know what happened in Florida. I probably never will, but I don't want something like that to ever happen in Pennsylvania. And a presidential election is a good one. I think the importance of photo ID is more for local elections. Kate, you've been in elections.
I was township supervisor.
Well, you can win an election in a township by 2 or 3 votes.
Yes, you can.
And
you can lose one that way as well, Carol.
That is correct. So the more important piece to voter ID is the local elections. That way, we'll be sure that when people come in to vote, they are who they say they are. And when you win an election by 5 votes, those 5 votes are all legitimate votes.
Well, I think change is hard for everybody. And I think people are a little nervous about it. And when you go to vote, Carol, you're voting in front of your neighbors. The judge of elections is usually somebody that you know personally. And so are the ladies who sit at the table with the big books. I think people don't want to be embarrassed. And I think particularly people of a certain age don't want to be embarrassed. So what can we say to reassure them that this is going to be fine, they won't have a problem?
This is a part of our life now. I have to show photo ID when I rent a carpet cleaner. You have to show photo ID when I bought shoes at Famous Footwear. It's part of our life. And we've certainly trained election workers. When someone comes in, please ask for a photo ID. If they don't have a photo ID, offer a provisional ballot immediately.
Make it easy for them.
Protect the right for them, their right to vote, which is the objective of this exercise. So we're going to ask for photo ID. I think more than 95% of people will have photo ID. They'll be standing in line and they'll be talking about it and they'll have their photo ID out. If you happen to get to the end of the line and you're ready to vote, you don't have photo ID, ask for a provisional ballot, and
you'll be able to vote.
Absolutely, and your vote will count if you are who you say you are.
All right, I think that's it. Now, we're running out of time. I just want to sum up a few things just so I'm right. If you have a driver's license, you're okay.
Yes.
If you had a driver's license, you can get a non-driver ID.
A driver's license in the last 22 years.
Wow, 22 years. Okay. If you have neither a driver's license nor a non-driving photo ID from PennDOT, your department, the Department of State, will issue through the PennDOT offices a Department of State ID.
Correct.
And that does not require a raised birth certificate seal
or a Social Security card. It requires the number but not the card.
Okay, other forms of acceptable ID so that we can be sure that you are who you say you are. And if you have none of them and you just show up at the polls and you don't have an acceptable ID, you can vote by provisional ballot.
Correct.
All right. And also, if you're a woman who got married and your names don't exactly match, or you're a woman like me who uses Kate when your mother called you Catherine, you can still vote.
Your name needs to substantially conform. You can't say you're Carol Achel.
And believe me, Carol, I wouldn't. Since you've been on the hot seat for several months over this whole law that we in the legislature passed, just to make sure that everybody's vote does count. And
counts once.
And counts once.
One person, one vote, one time.
No early and often, no dead people voting. Everybody gets a vote, but only one.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up. And that is all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Kate Harper. If you need assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office. The address and the number will be shown in just a moment. And you can use that information to get voter ID if you need it. Thanks for watching. Please join me next time for Legislative Report.